Technologies of Seeing, Photography, Cinematography and Television by Brian Winston. I've now finished reading this book, which is essentially just a compilation of 5 essays that Brian Winston has written. So we have Case of Cinema, Case of Colour Film, Case of 16mm film, the Case of HD TV, and the Case of 3D. Now, the books has one position in which it investigates all of these technologies and the development of these technologies, and it goes against technological determinism and rather focuses on the social necessities that have driven or suppressed the development of these technologies. So what it's saying is it doesn't agree with the view that technology dictates, the development of technology dictates social conventions and changes social conventions. It's the other way around, that social needs, necessities, conventions, the politics, the economics, the basic tastes, all of these will come together to either ignite technological innovation or suppress it. And through the different cases of the development of the moving image, colour film, etc., 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 Winston basically provides evidence for his position in regards to this, and quite succinctly, and well, not succinctly, but certainly strongly proves his point that society does either suppress or encourage the development of these technologies. And it's not a big book. It's only just over 100 pages, so I think it's about 130, the main text. The essays themselves can be a bit laborious because they are long and they are very, 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 very technical. But this is one of the book's strengths, in that Winston is talking about cinema, he's talking about media, he's talking about television, but he's not doing it necessarily in a nostalgic fashion. He really is honing down and focusing on the mechanics, the logistics, the technological realities of the development of the cinema, of how it's developing and how it continues to develop. I mean, this is one of the things that irritates me quite a bit with, particularly because I come from a film studies background, and I am myself a growing film academic. And one of the things that always irritates me about film academics is they're too obsessed with nostalgia of cinema. They're too conservative in their approach, and I genuinely believe it's damaging the study of cinema and the further development of cinema and of cinematic media and all its various forms. So I'm a huge fan of Winston, and indeed this book, what originally drew me to it was the title Technologies of Seeing, because it's very similar to the title of my first-class award-winning dissertation, Ways of Being, which itself was adapted from John Burge's quite famous book and documentary, Ways of Seeing. So Technologies of Seeing immediately jumped out at me, and I had a feeling that this was going to cover much of the same ground I looked at in my dissertation, and indeed it does. But while I can't say I've done exactly the same thing. I mean, in my dissertation, I talk about something called, I refer to it as the cave-like comfort zone. And basically what I was referring to was the complacency in cinema and in its development, in the academic study of it, the overall approach to it. And I was very vaguely pushing on this point and heading in that direction. But what Winston does in his book is he more accurately defines it and explores it through these various technologies, and through all the technical details he includes. He beautifully illustrates his points and proves pretty much all of his points to be correct. And I say pretty much all of his points because what's key about this book is it was actually written in 1996. Well, at least that's when it was published, so mid-90s. So this book is 20 years old now, and what is astounding about it is it still holds up now. In the book he is talking about technologies that have been, but he also starts looking at HD television and 3D, which in the mid-90s 3D hadn't really come back yet, and HD TV was only just being hinted at as coming into the consumer market. And of course, he does talk about in a few years that HD TVs will be on the market, and he does hint at a resurgence in 3D. And of course, this is exactly what has happened, which he beautifully illustrates through his argument in saying that it's the social necessities which have suppressed these developments thus far. And as indeed the last decade has shown, that more and more the social necessities have shifted now. Everyone wants immersive cinema. They want it to be in 3D. Everyone wants higher definition. They want it to look more like reality. They want it to be more immersive. So again, and I think this just has a lot to say about our state of living at the moment. I mean, we are connected to the internet. We have access to so much information, which in a sense is encouraging us to be more specific, to come closer to reality. So I think looking at what Winston says in his book and applying it to all the developments that have happened since his book's publication, and indeed also the internet as well, which Winston doesn't really touch upon, which I'm quite surprised by. But it'd be interesting to see him do an updated version of this, with a couple more essays and one on the internet, and talk about why it essentially has taken so long for the internet to come into the mainstream and be embraced, and what were the social suppressions behind that. But I mean, the book is 20 years old, but it's still highly relevant. You can still take all of these arguments and apply them in the contemporary, as I've just explained, and everything he says about classical technologies, the developments of them, all holds true. And certainly, if you were looking to read this book, a online course, a free online course, I'd actually recommend doing alongside it, because it actually touches on all the technologies he talks about in the book, is in fact The Language of Hollywood, Storytelling, Sound and Colour, which is a MOOC I have done, I've completed. I've also done a review of it, and I spoke quite highly of it. It's on Coursera, and it is free, and there's always more sessions coming up. So I think you'd be quite interested, and it's not that time consuming really. There's a few lectures and you just have to watch some films. And I reckon if you were to do this course alongside reading this book, which I basically kind of did, I kept putting bits of this book off, so yeah, I've been reading it for quite some time. It does all come together as an overly fulfilling experience. But overall, it's been hugely invaluable, even if it is a bit out of date, but the argument still holds true, and indeed everything you say you can apply to all the innovations that have happened since the publication of this book. It's been in many ways, it's been a companion to what I've written in my dissertation, because again, I do cover quite a few of the technology he talks about, and speculate on why it's taken so long for large format cinema, for instance, to come into the mainstream, which indeed it is now. We have this demand for immersive cinema. And I was a little annoyed actually, because reading it there was some good points. So I was kind of annoyed I didn't come across it when I originally was researching this, because there's some good points in here that would have strengthened this argument even more so. But that doesn't matter, because this is in the past now, and it continues on in my sequel research project to Ways of Being, Ways to Interface. So I'm sure there's plenty I can include or use from technologies of seeing that will further strengthen this research project. Yes, finally, I would say that this is a quite heavily academic, technology-ridden, specific, detail-heavy book. So it's not light reading, and I would recommend it to students of film, researchers, and practitioners, really. I think that and sociologists as well. They could learn a great deal from this. And yeah, if you're interested in the development of the internet, there's much in here you can apply to it, and create your own argument out of it. So yes, very glad I've read it, and highly recommend it to anyone who it would be of use to.